Now, what's going on at the BBC? The accusation is of institutional bias against President Trump that caused damage to his reputation, to put it mildly. A documentary produced by the BBC showed video clips of President Trump in which two segments of the speech, which were 54 minutes apart, were spliced together to give the false and misleading impression that he was inciting his supporters to violence on January 6th. The unedited video of the speech shows the president urging supporters to be peaceful as they march to the U.S. Capitol. Let's watch.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
The BBC's Director General, Tim Davie, resigned in disgrace this week, along with the CEO of BBC News, Deborah Turness. But on her way out the door, Deborah Turness publicly denied the allegation of editorial bias at the BBC, despite the fact that the controversy only came to light because of a leaked internal memo in which persistent editorial bias at the BBC was found regarding the most controversial issues on the world scene, including the following. First issue, coverage of Israel versus Hamas. The internal memo found that the BBC's main English coverage was more balanced regarding Israel than the BBC Arabic counterpart. For example, on October 7th, 2023, there were 19 different articles about Israeli hostages from BBC's English coverage, but 0 articles appearing on BBC Arabic. So I don't know who to blame here, the Arab audience for demanding 0 coverage of Israeli suffering, or maybe the BBC for catering to an audience that demanded 0 coverage of Israeli suffering. Now, we all understand that telling 2 different versions of the same story is misinformation, and that's the BBC's fault. BBC Arabic lied to its audience by doctoring the story of October 7th. Now, it doesn't matter whether the Arabic audience wanted to hear about it or not. That's not the standard. If a public broadcaster funded by the UK government had told the true story, one version of the story, maybe the audience for BBC Arabic wouldn't be out there making fools of themselves trying to deny that October 7th happened. Second issue, transgender coverage. Now, this one's no surprise. Difficult questions regarding transgender issues were downplayed despite coverage by other media outlets. The coverage was found to be one-sided as well. There were no stories about biological males invading women's bathrooms, although a group of nurses in the UK had fought against the invasion of women's private spaces. So the BBC here ignored the outright attack on women's safety and participation in society that has been launched in recent years by hostile males alleging that they're transgender. For example, I don't need to discuss the Gold's Gym controversy in the U.S., or maybe I do. A biological man confronted a naked woman in the women's locker room at the Gold's Gym. Now, she complained, and her account was terminated. Meanwhile, the biological male has a history of domestic violence. He broke his ex-wife's jaw. She needed reconstructive surgery. Her name was Alexis. Now, he has now taken the name Alexis for his transgender identity, and big surprise, he's not had the sex change operation. Big surprise there. Third issue, illegal migration. The BBC limited coverage of the 7 million illegal migrants and asylum seekers in the UK. Now, several BBC documentaries contained no commentary from expert historians, but rather non-experts who talked about racism, prejudice, and British colonialism in a generalized manner without authoritative sources. So, pushing the narrative that anyone who opposes illegal migration must be racist. No supporting data. Meanwhile, the streets of London have turned into Afghanistan. The Muslim call to prayer is blaring from loudspeakers 5 times a day. The UK has been transformed by illegal migration. Fourth issue, racism. The internal memo says the BBC often presented stories about racism without research to document the claims. For example, a story about redlining. Now, in the U.S., it's called redlining, which is discriminatory pricing for certain neighborhoods with a high percentage of minorities. Now, the story was about car insurance rates, focusing only on road accident and crime rates for that neighborhood, ignoring all other factors and using bad data. And only one guest agreed with the story's conclusion about redlining. So all of that information about institutional bias, editorial bias at the BBC is according to an internal memo. It's a sad state of affairs for the BBC. It seems they're now in the business of misinformation. They did it for profit, obviously. Now, I don't know who they're working for. They wanted to tell a false narrative about Donald Trump to try to delegitimize his presidency. But they've been exposed. The BBC has apologized and made a retraction, but they refuse to pay damages. Now, the president has asked for $1 billion to be made whole for the damage to his reputation. Now, if the BBC doesn't want to pay that, it needs to make a reasonable counteroffer. I don't know how the BBC is organized, but if they're not prepared to make a cash offer, maybe an ownership stake? Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe.